Hello and welcome everyone. In this video, we will discuss how we can create a stored procedure in SQL Server for insert and update operations. So we will start off this video by understanding how we can create a stored procedure for first inserting some data into a table. Then we will discuss how we can create a stored procedure to update the data of the table, and then we will create a stored procedure for both the operations insert as well as update, and in the last we will discuss how we can create a stored procedure which will insert, update as well as delete some records. Now before we start off, I would like to tell you that we regularly come up with these type of tutorials. So if you really like our tutorial, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now without any further delay, let's jump to the very first topic and let us discuss how we can create a stored procedure in SQL Server for inserting some data into a table. Now what is a stored procedure? Basically, stored procedure is a set of SQL queries that we can use again and again. We can create our own set of SQL queries and then store it in a procedure. So a stored procedure is nothing but a place where we can store set of SQL queries. Now we can execute a stored procedure just by calling its name. What will happen? We can use a stored procedure to store multiple SQL statements, and then we need to just call the procedure name to execute all those queries at once. Now to understand how we can create a stored procedure for inserting data into a table, we will implement one example. So what we will do in this example, first we will create a table, then we will insert some data into the table. After this we will create a stored procedure which will implement one insert statement, and with the help of the stored procedure we will insert some data into the table. Now how we can do that? We need to call the procedure, and with the stored procedure we need to use multiple input parameters so that we can pass input values from user to the procedure, and procedure will pass that values in the insert statement so that we can insert that data into the table. Now let's execute this example. So here I have opened my SQL Server Management Studio. In this I am using create table statement to create a table with 6 columns. So the name of the table is customer table. After this we have defined 6 columns. So very first column is this cust_id, which represents customer ID, and it is an auto increment column which is of integer data type. Then we have defined first name, last name, email, city, and in the last we have defined country. So if I execute this code block, it will create a table with name customer table TBL. Now the next step is to insert some data into the table. So here I am using multiple insert into statements so that we can insert some data. Here I am inserting 5 rows of data in the table. So let me execute this as well. So here you can see all these statements has been executed. Now let's look at the data of the table. So for this I will simply use the select statement. Let me execute this, and here you can see the data. So this table consists 5 rows of data. Now let's move to the actual step where we will create a stored procedure. So here you can see the code for creating a stored procedure. So what we are doing in this code, first we are specifying that we are using this database. The name of this database is SQL Server Guides. After this we are using a create procedure statement to define a stored procedure, and this is the name of the stored procedure, which is USP_insert cust data. So USP here is a naming convention, so it represents user defined stored procedure. And after this we are using brackets, and within that brackets we have defined 5 input parameters. So very first parameter is first_name, then we have last name, then we have email, city, and country. So in this way we have defined 5 input parameters. We did not define the input parameter for ID because we have set it as auto increment. After this we are using the as keyword, and then we have defined this begin and end block. Now within this begin and end block we are simply using an insert into statement. So we have specified insert into, then the name of the table, which is customer table, then the values keyword, and within the brackets we need to pass the input parameter. So with the help of first_name we will set the first name, with last name we will specify the last name, with email we will set the email. In this way we are inserting one single record in the customer table, and once this insert statement has been executed, we will execute one print statement, and this print statement will print this new customer data inserted. Let me execute this code block, and here you can see our stored procedure has been created successfully. Now let's start using it. So now let's see how we can execute this stored procedure. Now to execute the stored procedure, we either use execute keyword or we use the short form EXEC for execute. Then we need to specify the name of the stored procedure that we want to execute. After that, we need to pass the input parameters that we want to pass. So here we have passed 5 input parameter values. All these parameter values are of string type. Now let me execute this, and here you can see it has returned this thing, new customer data inserted, which means our insert statement has been executed successfully and this record has been inserted in the customer table. Now let's check it by using the select statement. So here is my select statement, select star from customer table. Let me execute it, and here you can see 6th record has been added. So with this we have understood how we can create a stored procedure and how we can insert data using it. Now let's move forward and let's discuss how we can create a stored procedure for update operation on a table. And again, for creating a stored procedure in SQL Server, we will use input parameters, and input parameters of stored procedure will be used to pass the updated value. So just like we have created the stored procedure for insert operation, in the same way we will create a stored procedure where we will keep some input parameters so that we can pass updated values, and instead of using the insert into statement we will use update statement and update data of the table. So let us discuss how we can do that with the help of an example. Now for this execution also in SQL Server we will use the same approach. So first we will create a table, and in this case we will create a table named profile, and in this we have specified 5 columns. So very first column of this profile table is user underscore ID, which is an auto increment integer type column. Then we have specified first name, last name, country, and we have specified another column which is active. So if I execute this code block, I am extremely sorry, I have selected is active, that's why it has returned this error. Now let me click somewhere else and then execute this. Now if I execute this code block, here you can see a command has been completed successfully. This means our table has been created. Once the table has been created, so the next step that we are going to execute is to insert some data into the table. So here we are using insert into statement to insert 5 records. So by executing this code block, we have successfully inserted 5 rows in the profile table. Let's check it with the help of a select statement. So I will write select, and let me execute this select statement, and here you can see 5 records has been there in this table. Now let's move to the actual step where we will create a stored procedure, and here on the screen you can see the SQL code for creating a stored procedure. So first we are using this create procedure command, create a stored procedure with this name, which is USB underscore update profile, and then we have specified one input parameter which is user ID, which is of integer data type, and then we have defined as keyword, and within that we have specified the begin end block. Now our update statement will be placed within this begin end block, and what we are doing with this update statement, we are simply updating the profile table and we are setting the value of is active column to true, where the user ID is the one which we have specified as an input parameter. So that's why we have used this statement update profile to specify the profile table that we are going to update it. Then we are setting the value using the set keyword of this is active column to true, where user underscore ID is the user ID that we have specified as an input parameter. So let me execute this code block, and extremely sorry, I have selected user underscore ID, that's why it has returned this error. Let me execute it once again, and with this we have created our stored procedure. Now let us understand how we can use this stored procedure to update the data of the table. So here you can see we are executing this update profile stored procedure using the execute keyword, and we have specified the value of user ID as 105. So if I show you in the table at 105 we have this record, and here you can see the value for is active for this record is false. So what we are going to do, we are going to update its value of is active from false to true using this stored procedure. So let me execute this code block, and it has returned this thing, one row affected. If I come back and if I execute this select statement again, and this time you can see for record 105 the is active value is true. So with this, I hope you all understand how we can create a stored procedure, update data of a table. And now let's move forward and understand how we can create a stored procedure which can execute both of these tasks at once. So we will understand how we can create a stored procedure that can insert as well as update data into a table. So for this task, what we will do, we will create a stored procedure which will implement both insert as well as update statement. Now to pass data into the stored procedure, we need to use input parameters. So let us understand how we can do this implementation with the help of an example. And here you can see we have created one stored procedure. Now what we are going to do, we are going to use the customer table for this implementation. So if I show you the select statement again, so here you can see the customer table which we have created in the very first example. Now currently it has 6 records. So what I will do, I will create a stored procedure which will take input parameters, it will take values as input, and then it will check whether the record is present in the customer table or not. Now if the record is already present, then it will update that record, and if the record does not present, then in that case it will insert that record. So let me show you this SQL query for this example. Here again we are using the create procedure statement to create a stored procedure with name insert update data. Then we have specified 5 input parameters: first name, last name, email, city, and again country. Then we have specified the begin end block, and within the begin end block, what we are going to do, we are going to use the email, and we will check whether the record or the email that we have passed as an input already exists in the customer table or not. As we all know, email is such type of field which will be unique for each user, so we can use this field to check the existence of a record. So here you can see we are using if exists statement, and within that we are using the select statement to check whether the email already exists in the table or not. If the email already exists, it means we need to update that particular record. So we will use the update statement on the customer table. Let me change it because it is capital T, and then we will use the set keyword to set the value for each column as specified in the input parameter. So we will set the first name as the first name that we have passed as an input parameters, and we will do the same for all the records except for email, because we are using email to check the existence of that particular record. Now once this update statement has been executed, we will print this string, that is customer data updated. Now in the starting of this begin block, we have used this if statement. To counter this, we will also have the one else statement where we will use the insert into statement. What if the email does not exist in the table? Then in that case we need to insert record into the table. So we will use insert into statement on this customer table, and again here in the customer table T is capital, so let me modify it, and then we need to specify the values. And once this insert statement has been executed, this string will be printed out, that is new customer data inserted. So now let me execute this code block, and here you can see the stored procedure has been created successfully. Now let's understand how we can use this stored procedure. Now here you can see the SQL query for execution of this stored procedure. So what we are going to do, first we are using this execute statement to update data of the customer table. If you look closely to this email address is already there in our table, which is at index 5. So customer ID 5, we have this email address, which means it is already there in our table. So what we are modifying, the city and the country. So for this record, the city is Chicago and the country is United States, but with this stored procedure we have passed city as Toronto and country as Canada. So this is how we are going to use the update operation from the stored procedure. And after that we have passed one unique record. Name of this record is James. Here you can see one unique email address for this user. So very first execution statement will update the record, and the second execution statement will insert the record in the customer table. So let me execute this code block, and here you can see it has written one row affected for the first stored procedure, and it has written this thing table customer data updated, and then it has again updated the one record, and it has returned new customer data inserted. Now if I show you the select statement, let me execute it back, and here you can see earlier we have 6 records. Now after the execution of the stored procedure we have 7 records. Now the James record has been added in the very last, and for customer ID 5 where we updated the city and country, so it has Toronto now and the country is Canada. Now let's move forward and let's discuss how we can create a stored procedure for implementing insert, update and as well as delete operation on a table. Now I hope you all understand how we can execute insert as well as update statement, but how we can implement delete statement, let's discuss that with the help of an example. Now again, for this execution we are going to use the same customer table, and here you can see the code for the stored procedure. Here we are creating a stored procedure with this name USP underscore manage customers, and with this we have specified 7 input parameters. Very first parameter is customer ID, then we have first name, last name, email, city, country, and in the last we have this statement type. Now this statement type input parameter will be used to recognize whether we want to implement the insert statement, update statement, or delete statement. Now after this we have specified the as keyword, and then we have specified the begin end block, and within the begin end block first we are checking if the statement type is insert. So here we are using the insert statement. So if the statement type is insert, then we are going to implement insert into statement on the customer table, and then we will use all the input parameters to insert data into the table, and then we will use the insert into statement to insert all the input parameters to insert data into the table. And once this insert statement has been executed, we will use the print statement to print this string new customer data inserted. After this we are again using the if statement to check whether the statement type is update. So if the statement type is update, we are going to implement the update statement on the customer table, and we will update all the records. Here to update the record we are going to use the customer ID, which is a unique for every customer. So we will use the customer ID in our where clause, and once this update statement has been executed, we are going to print this string stating customer data updated. And after this we are again using else if statement to check whether the statement type is delete. So if the statement type is delete, we are going to execute the delete statement. So we will use delete from, then the name of the table, which is customer table, and then we are using the customer ID as our to delete data from this customer table. And once this delete statement has been executed, we will use the print statement to print the string on the screen, which is customer data deleted, so that we get to know which statement has been executed. Let me execute this code block, and with this we have successfully created our stored procedure. Now let's discuss how we can use this. Now here you can see I am executing this stored procedure 3 times. Very first execution statement is to insert data, and here you can see in the last I have passed insert as my input parameter to specify that we are going to implement the insert statement. Now here one thing we need to, or we can say we need to be careful with, if we look into the customer table, let me execute it. If we look into the customer table, here you can see there are 7 customer IDs. Now while passing input parameters, we need to make sure that we pass unique customer ID. So I will pass 8 for that. So for the customer ID will be 8, the name will be Katharina Janks, and this will the email address, then the city, then the country, and then we are specifying that the statement type is insert. Let me select this and execute, and here you can see one row affected, new customer data inserted. With this we have implemented insert operation. Let's move forward, and this time I will keep the ID as 6 only, and I have specified this thing that we are going to implement the update statement. So again I will select it and execute it, and here you can see one row affected and customer data updated. Now earlier at number 6 we have this record, which is Sherry. Lumbers is the last name, Sherry is the first name, but while execution of the update statement we have specified the first name as Katharina, the last name as Jenks. So this will update the user record given at user ID 6. And again in the last we are using the delete operation on the stored procedure. That's why we have specified delete as our statement type, and again we are going to delete the record which is given at user ID 6. So before executing this delete operation, let me show you the customer table again, and here you can see this is our table. We have inserted one record at index 8. So customer ID 8 is Katharina Janks. This is the email address. City is Chicago and the country is United States. And then we have updated the record which is at user ID 6. So earlier it was something else, now it is Katharina Janks. And here you can see the country and city for this record is different. Now next we are going to implement the delete operation. So let me execute this SQL query, and you can see customer data deleted, Now let's come back to the select statement and again execute it. And here you can see the record with customer ID 6 is been removed from this table. So with this, I hope you got all the examples which we have implemented related to stored procedure in SQL Server. And with this, we have come to the end of this tutorial session. If you really like this video, press the like button and do subscribe to our YouTube channel for more tutorials like this. Thank you.